Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
Good morning, CaneSport. It's November 10th, 2021. I'm Gary Ferman, the publisher of CaneSport.com, joined as always by Matt Shodell, our managing editor, who's really upset this morning because we have nothing to argue about. But Matt, we might get there. You never know, because we're going to talk a little bit about FSU this morning. And one of the main stories that we have on the website at CaneSport.com is an analysis of the Seminoles team that's going to play Miami on Saturday, and a really tough team to figure out because, you know, they seem to have some talent in certain spots. I mean, their edge rushers are very good. Their secondary is decent, but they just haven't been able to find a way to consistently play good football. And let me start by asking you, you've had the time this week to take a little bit of a look inside FSU. Give me your overall thoughts on the Seminoles.
I mean, they started the year really badly. And I think that, you know, the last 5 games, I think they found their legs a little bit. You know, they did win 3 in a row. One of them was beating North Carolina, beating Syracuse, beating UMass. Then they lost to Clemson by 10 in what was actually a pretty, you know, well-contested game. And then you sort of have to throw out the last game, you know, because it was against a decent, you know, NC State team. They fell behind by 14, but, you know, FSU was missing a lot of players, you know, with the flu-like symptoms, including their quarterback. Now that, you know, they're still suffering from that illness. And if that lingers into Saturday, you know, Miami's going to sort of luck out, you know, if they're missing a bunch of players again. But this is a dangerous FSU team, a team that is better than its record. I mean, much better than its record over the last 5 games, if they're healthy enough to have everyone going. And, you know, and the caveat with that is, like, Miami has some issues of its own heading into this game. Like, you know, when we were out of practice yesterday morning, like, James Williams, you know, we put on the message board, but, like, he was running around and he couldn't move his left arm. Like, they didn't, like, there's a drill where the coach throws you a pass, like you run towards the coach and he throws you a pass and you put your arms up and you catch it. And that's the entire drill. As stupid as that sounds, that's the drill. And they throw the pass to every player. And then James comes running along with his left arm pinned to his side like his dislocated shoulder. They don't throw him the pass and he just runs. So it's basically just jogging one way, jogging the other way. Like, that's not a great sign. And, you know, you're sort of harping on James for having this horrible performance. Well, he was hurt in that game, and he couldn't tackle in that game. And he literally is trying to battle through not using his left arm. So I would say let's lay off James Williams for a little bit. His PFF grade was bad. Again, I didn't watch him enough to say, oh, he was awful. He didn't stand out to me as being awful. But the guy's playing through obviously a significant injury. I haven't seen a guy try to practice with that kind of injury ever. Like, kudos to this kid, man. We were talking about how, you know, Gervin Hall and BJ Jennings just gave up on the team. Like, this guy is not giving up on this team. Like, you know, if fans were allowed out there, they'd be like, what is this guy doing practicing? Like, he must have insisted on practicing. And then the other injury is Tyreek Stevenson, which doesn't look as serious. You know, it's another shoulder also with him. He'll be fine, but he was also in a red jersey. So James is the one to really worry about. But, you know, I don't want to be too long-winded here, but, you know, the key for Miami is to obviously hopefully have both those guys, because, you know, the secondary as it is now very depth depleted. I mean, the backup safety, if James is out or unable to really go a lot, would be probably Isaiah Dunson, who was a cornerback until 2 weeks ago and not a very good one at that. You know, Miami's having all sorts of problems. Like, FSU's strength offensively is probably the run game. It is the run game. They have a good running back. And their strength on defense is the defensive line, which Miami has repeatedly said is the best edge rushers they've seen since Alabama. And they're not lying, like, they are. So it's a problem. And then it bothers me also, like Garen Justice yesterday, you know, as reporters, we were sort of joking about it. Like, Garen Justice is like, what do we need to change anything in short yardage? And he ran through the 4 of the plays and what went wrong, right? One of them, well, 2 of them, he just said the right side of the line didn't do what it was supposed to do. One of them, the quarterback, didn't do what he was supposed to do. And the other one he blamed on, I think, Cody Brown leaping instead of, I don't know what he was supposed to do. I didn't see any holes there. But, like, we were joking after Garen Justice left, like, So you should keep doing what you're doing, because if you fix those problems, which are your offensive line's not good enough and your quarterback made a bad decision and your running back made a bad decision, just keep doing what you're doing. It'll work itself out. Like his explanation for what went wrong, he tried to make it sound like it was no big deal. They'll fix it. But the problem was just bad offensive line play on two of them, bad decisions on two of them. Like, and you keep running the same play over and over. We're just joking, like, this is what he doesn't think they need to change anything for. Like, so.
I knew you'd find something.
I've been a little long-winded on the answer, and I sort of went off topic, but that's my thoughts in a nutshell.
You just are trying to grow that new cult you got out there. What do we call it? The Legion of Doom or the?
No, well, look, you could call it the Legion, Matt Shodell's Legion of Doomers, or Matt Shodell's Legion of Zoom. I prefer the Legion of Zoom because I'm actually not a doomer. Believe it or not, I have a more positive outlook on the future than you do. Fans, for some reason, have this crazy notion that you're more positive than I am, when I'm the one who keeps saying I think the team will be fine next year with or without Manny, and you're the one who's saying no. Like, I don't understand what topsy-turvy world we live in.
I was more positive about the Georgia Tech performance on offense.
Well, that's why, I guess. Yeah, I'm more positive long-term. You're more positive based on one game. All right, whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they don't, obviously Georgia Tech stunk, but if they don't screw up all those short yardage situations, they might have had 700 yards of offense. So, I thought they played pretty well on offense, but overall, I think it is what it is. It's an average team that's winning some and losing some, and that brings me to this week's game.
Yeah, but hold on. Let me just say something real quick. What bothered me wasn't, just so people know, I don't want to be mischaracterized. What bothered me wasn't that the offense shouldn't have had 1,000 yards. I said they should have had 1,000 yards. What bothered me, and I think people maybe missed this point, this was the game I thought would be Miami's statement that we're not going to play and let bad teams, not even average, bad teams, hang around with us. I literally said before the game, the reason the Georgia Tech game is interesting to me isn't because Miami is going to win. They will. It's how they're going to win. I thought this was going to be the game where, coming off 2 top 20 wins back at home, they were going to basically blow this team out and be like, not we're back, but like we're on the road to where we need to be. And instead we saw these stop and starts and bad play calls and turnovers. And yeah, fans can say, oh, well, the turnovers, don't count those. That's not coaching. That's not whatever. But you know what? That's football. Like, the entire practice we were at yesterday, they did brand new drills we'd never seen before during the media portion, which was just basically they have the wide receivers and the running backs carrying the ball, and then 2 defensive players come up and try to knock it out. They haven't done that once. So, like, it's like the problem crops up and then the coaches correct it. Whereas you get this feeling at other programs, they're coaching this stuff all during the offseason that, like, hey, this is how you're supposed to play. So, like, it's all a reflection of the coaches and the team, how they play and how they let this horrible team, in my opinion, stay within 3 points of them. That's what bothered me. That's all.
Well, we've got Mike Harley's weekly blog on the website this morning as well, and he talks a little bit about the fumbling and those issues. And he thought that they were creeping up a little bit the week before, when there were a lot of plays where the ball came loose as guys were going down and stuff. And maybe they didn't take it quite as seriously last week as that they may have should have, as a major problem that needed to be addressed. And then it kind of caught up to them against Georgia Tech. So you'll find that interesting in Mike Harley's blog, among other things. But let me get back to FSU here for a minute, because, Matt, I think this is a very dangerous game for Miami. I don't know that that's, groundbreaking revelation for anybody or anything. But, I look at an FSU team that probably is a little bit better than its record. I mean, they opened the season against Notre Dame and lose in overtime, which, was just a crushing season opener for them. They had both quarterbacks play relatively well in that game, but that was a really good performance by them to score 38 points on Notre Dame and end up losing 41-38. Then they come out the next week and have a total letdown against Jacksonville State. Now, they could play Jacksonville State 10 times, and I got to believe that they would win 9 of them. I don't know how the heck they lost to Jacksonville State. I'm guessing they were probably pretty beat up from the Notre Dame game, and mentally and physically didn't get themselves ready to play. And obviously just an atrocious loss. And that kind of carried over the next week at Wake Forest, which nobody realized at the time was probably the best team in the ACC this year. Don't ask me how the heck that's happened. But they're really good on offense. And Florida State they scored 35 points on Florida State. Florida State really struggled offensively in that game. So that was a real bad loss. And then the next week, they found a way to lose to a very average Louisville team in another close game, 31-23. So they're sitting there 0-4, and the season is a disaster at that point. But slowly, they started playing better. They peeled off 3 straight wins. They win a close game against Syracuse. They stunned North Carolina at Chapel Hill, mind you, which was a very impressive victory. And then they come back in a lopsided game, blow out UMass. So they're thinking, okay, we've won 3 in a row. Now we've got this thing turned around. And now they got to go play at Clemson, which is still a tough assignment for a team at this level. And they played relatively competitively. They lost 30-20 to Clemson. And then they come back and play an NC State game that if Wake Forest is not the best team in the ACC this year, NC State probably is, even though the Hurricanes found a way to beat the Wolfpack down here at Hard Rock Stadium. And FSU played them relatively competitively, 28-14, with a whole bunch of guys out, including a quarterback in Jordan Travis, who they never win without. They're 3-2 when he starts. They are 0-4 when he doesn't start. So they clearly need Jordan Travis on the field to play well, and they played without him in that last game against NC State and only lost by 14. So I think that this is a dangerous team that Miami is going to walk into on Saturday at Doak Campbell Stadium. The Hurricanes have won 3 in a row, 5 straight games that essentially are coin toss games down to the wire. Some with the better teams in the league, some with the worst teams in the league. So you don't really know what Miami team is going to show up week to week. You've got a quarterback who's been playing great. He's got to be able to continue that now against a defense that's probably going to put more pressure on him than these other defenses that he's gone against in recent weeks have. There's a decent secondary on the FSU side of the field. So I can see the Miami offense having a little bit tougher time of things, and maybe the offensive line issues that we know they have that have not always been exposed in every single game, depending on matchups. Those could end up rearing their head a little bit this weekend, Matt. And you put all that together, I'm expecting another life or death game into the fourth quarter. And I think Florida State could put together a really good ball game here in this matchup against Miami. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, my biggest issue isn't Miami's defense this week. Usually it's like, you got to outscore them. You got to outscore them. FSU's offense is just not consistent at all, and I think Miami's
but they have a quarterback that can run around, and that can create problems for a team that doesn't have linebackers that knows it can count on.
Yeah, but the problem FSU is going to have is I think they run the ball. I don't know if it was 60%, even higher than that percent of the time. They're not a team that passes the ball well. And no matter how much a quarterback runs around, like if you can't be multidimensional when Miami has a pretty beat up and not great secondary, like you're going to struggle. And they struggle as it is against some average defenses this year. So, I think Miami's defense can hold them and probably will hold them under 28 points, which is what their offense averages. And the key for me, believe it or not, and what concerns me, and call me crazy, but Tyler Van Dyke sort of hit the nail on the head. I asked him yesterday about, if he almost relishes when other teams blitz, because he's been amazing against the blitz. I mean, he gets the ball out very quickly, reads things very well. He's got the height to see over the line and just sees guys. And these guys are really quick. The slants are really, well run by Rambo and Harley, and easy to get them the ball in space, one-on-one coverage. Super easy for an inexperienced quarterback to make a throw in one-on-one coverage. And Mike Harley in his blog even talked about it. He's just throwing up 50-50 balls, right? And Tyler did put 4 balls in harm's way last game. Rhett Leslie even mentioned that, which he wasn't thrilled about. So, I already talked about I want Rhett Leslie to be aggressive in his play calling. I do. What concerns me is if FSU can get pressure just with their front four without blitzing, Miami's offense will struggle. Okay? Mark my words. And Miami's offensive line had better be on point because they cannot allow that to happen. Okay. This is as talented a front four, certainly since Michigan State, possibly since Alabama, that Miami's going to face. That's the strength of the defense. And it's just not a great matchup for Miami because of Miami's offensive line. And like everyone, all these coaches in Miami are starting to say how great the offensive line's playing, blah, 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 blah. Well, show me what defense that this offensive line has done anything against that has a great front four. And certainly nobody as good as the FSU front. So it's a question mark. And question marks at this point in the season worry me. And if they can get pressure that front four and have 7 defensive players in gaps behind that, where Tyler has to make quick decisions and throwing into coverage, that scares me. Now, with that said, they can't afford to be conservative in their approach. They just can't. You can't go on the road at FSU and say, you guys try to score and then we'll try to see what we do. No, like that never works. So you got to risk it. You got to hope Tyler's up to the task, not like Virginia, where they thought, hey, let's just wait and see what happens, right? Because this is going to be another game where Rhett Lashley's going to say, this might not be great for us on offense. There are some issues here, and he might want to pack it in and, do a lot of these these horizontal passes and, a lot of running plays to start the game. And I'm hoping, one deep shot to try and loosen him up, which he loves to do, on the first play, a flea flicker, 50 yards, and then run the ball, horizontal. I hate that stuff. So it's a fine line. They have to be aggressive, but be smart. And the offensive line has to pass block. These guys are sack animals. They have, I think, 25 sacks in 9 games. Last year, they had 9 sacks in 9 games, okay? So, and that's sacks. That's not even QB pressures and all that other stuff that goes with it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So, yeah.
I don't think you're going to be on Rhett Lashley's Christmas card list this year, but, there's legitimacy to some of what you're saying, no question about it.
They kicked us off the practice field this morning after period 6, or yesterday morning, after period 6. And I told the Miami Sports Information guy, I said, hey, listen, Manny told me I can stay for the rest of practice. He said, we've been giving him such great coverage that he's rewarding us. He said, I can stay out here. And they said, he just goes like this. He says, just get out of here, Matt.
All right. So we've got a lot of FSU analysis this morning. We've got the Mike Harley blog, as we talked about. And then to continue to prepare you for the Florida State game, we've got Garen Justice talking about the challenges that his offensive line faces. We've got Tyler Van Dyke discussing the challenge that he faces against the Florida State defense that we've been talking about. And then we've got Avante Williams talking about his sort of coming out party to the fans, really, with that amazing interception last week and getting to play. I think he played like 30 snaps or so against Georgia Tech. So he's getting on the field more. They've worked him into the nickel packages. When they drop James Williams down into the box, Avante goes back and plays center field. So he's getting a chance to play a little bit more. They're keeping it simple for him. Try not to make it too complex. He's just in on that one package, the dime coverage. And look, it seems to be working out well. And Avante was graded very, very high against Georgia Tech, amazingly high in 31 snaps. So that's a good sign for Avante Williams. All right, and we also have a recruiting story this morning on Georgia defensive tackle Quentel Jones. Miami's been recruiting him. Jess Simpson's doing a nice job. He's a 3-star defensive tackle from Georgia. A warning sign to me, Matt, is that Georgia and Georgia Tech are not among his top schools and not really recruiting him very seriously. That's never really a good sign to me for a kid from Georgia. But Miami is on to plan B in some cases in recruiting. It's a cold, hard fact. Matt and I have said we don't like it. I have not studied Quentel Jones enough to give an opinion on him. But Matt, they got to be really careful to me in this recruiting cycle. We've talked about it. They're better off probably in the portal than reaching for freshmen because the team is so young.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't look. You can call him Plan B because he's not a top recruit nationally by any means, but like they've been recruiting him forever. I mean, they like the kid. But you want another red flag, like the kid. I mean, just from what I've heard, the kid tried to commit to Mississippi State on the date he said he was committing, and they said, you know what, we don't have a spot for you. So like, he's certainly a plan B kid nationally, but for Miami, this might not be. This is a plan A kid because who else are you getting?
That's not good.
There's just not a lot of guys that, unfortunately, that want to come right now. It's like him, Daniel Lyons. Who else at defensive tackle can you say? And Daniel Lyons is, by the way, committed to FSU, obviously, but we'll visit. But who else can you say? Oh, here's a defensive tackle that's a high school kid that's going to come here. That's a top difference maker. There just isn't one right now, and that's such an important position. It's sort of okay just because they do have Jared Harrison Hunte and they have Leonard Taylor. Those are going to be two studs next year. But you do need to develop depth behind them. They're probably going to have to go to the portal at defensive tackles, my guess, and maybe even a defensive end, depending who they wind up with. And but yeah, your point's taken. I mean, you told me I can't argue with you because you want me to stay in a good mood, so I'm not going to argue with you. I agree.
All right. And if you missed last night's CaneSport live show, we've got the podcast on the website, and in a programming note tonight at 8:00, the Lamar Thomas show. And I'm not going to spill all the beans because it's still a work in progress, but I highly encourage everybody to watch the Lamar Thomas show tonight. There's going to be some FSU alumni on there, yakking it up with some Miami alumni, and God knows what's going to happen when that comes together. We're also expecting to have some current players on earlier in the show before that to talk it up a little bit. So that's going to do it for this morning. A relatively mellow Good Morning CaneSport for a change. For Matt Shodell, I'm Gary Ferman. We thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow morning, everybody.